how did God design this? Even though it gets really confusing, whether it's doctrine or relationships out in the world, it's like, what was the original design of all this?
Welcome back to the Authentic Christian Podcast. I'm Aaron. This is Scott. This is Tucker. And today we're talking about homosexuality. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. We're talking, I guess, specifically about homosexuality in this episode, but there's some other stuff that might kind of bleed in. The LGBTQ plus, I guess, acronym stands for L, lesbian, G, gay, B, bi, LGBT, T is for trans, Q is for queer, right? LGBTQ plus. And the plus, I guess, just means different things because as time goes on, they add, used to be LGBT, LGBTQ. So things kind of get extended onto there. So we're going to talk mainly about homosexuality just because it's such a massive topic. There's no way you could do an episode without doing really, I think, disservice to dealing with some of the things. But
and really the word biblically, which is where we're coming from, encapsulates the idea. We separate those today and talk about homosexuals are men, lesbians are women, but the Bible doesn't say lesbian. It's just for both. It's for all of that. Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you were going to look at the Bible and say, well, does the Bible talk about it? There's 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9 actually talks about, like New King James says homosexuals, which the Greek word's like malakos, I think is what it is in that instance, but malakoi, which I think means soft. And then sodomites, which is arsenokoites maybe. So those are some words that are used, but then you have like, I guess in like Romans 1, you have an even, I'd say just more straightforward description. Romans 1:26. This reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. So it's man and woman is natural, right? So the women gave that up. They gave up the use of the man. Verse 27, likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful and receiving the penalty of their error, which was due. Now, we don't have time, I guess, in this one too, to answer the arguments. There are some people that will say, like Matthew Vines, he wrote this book, God and the Gay Christian, and he makes a lot of arguments trying to go through the Bible and methodically say, well, you know, Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't homosexuality, it was gang rape. And he tries to go through all these things. I did an answer in the error with Don Blackwell, which will be in the link tree, that goes through and deals with each of the biblical passages. Mm-hmm. So if you want more of, I guess, a handling of what the Bible says about the topic verse by verse, that's probably a better video. This one, we may talk about some of that, but I guess just go ahead and get it. What does the definition, with that sort of like long intro, I guess by me, homosexuality, what would you say the definition is and how common would you say that it is?
Standard English definition is the quality or characteristic of being sexually attracted solely to people of one's own sex.
And the people that were bi would say,
well, it's both.
Both. Yeah, exactly. Obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's extremely common in our culture today. Mm-hmm. You see it portrayed everywhere. Now, in practice, it's not as common as it is portrayed, but the idea of it, I mean, it's constantly on your news feed. It's constantly in TV shows. Mm-hmm. Every show has to have it. Every story has to have it these days, it seems. So I'd say it's extremely common these days in that sense. If
there's an article, it's actually 3 articles, but Jeff Miller wrote it at Apologetics Press recently. I put that in my notes. Let me read you that. It's called Homosexuality, Society, Science, and Psychology. It's 3 parts. It's going to be in the link tree. If you don't do anything else from this episode, please go read those 3 articles. It was one of the most just fascinating, eye-opening things for me. He did a lot of research. Jeff has a PhD in something fancy. He's a smart guy. But he talks about the history. Like part 1, he talks about the history, and he goes through the history of just American media and when like the first TV shows that had people portrayed as homosexuals were on there and how more common it got to the point, like you're saying now, where it's like almost every show or every movie, you know. And they even have in Hollywood, like, what do they call it? Like inclusivity. Like professionals, where literally like if your movie doesn't have enough inclusion of something, like
you got to have a certain percentage.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly how it works. I haven't done it, but I've seen things where it's like I remember I saw one movie where somebody was catching a lot of heat. It was like it was a movie about like Hispanics, right? And they didn't have enough of a different race in there and they were catching heat for it. I'm like, but the movie is taking place in like a Hispanic setting with a Hispanic culture. I would expect everybody to be in this, but it was a movie, you know? So I know that there's that sort of thing now. I think it's running rampant in Hollywood because it's like, if one person just wants to like tear you down and cancel you, all they have to say is, well, you didn't have enough 12-year-olds in this one section of a scene, right? I mean, like, so it's kind of crazy, but that article part 1 talks about that. I'll keep referencing this article because my goal is to get you to read it.
It was a good article.
Great set. So, but you talk about how common it is. You see it a lot in TV now. I mean, like you said, almost every show.
Yeah, it's made its way into children's programming as well. That's come up. So
that's frustrating. Like my daughter loves Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And we watch most of it on YouTube, right? But some of the recent ones, we don't watch the newer ones because I think they've introduced okay, my daughter was like a year and a half. Like she's not old enough to process what in the world, is going on with all this stuff.
That's right. I mean, number one, when you're talking about children's programming, there ought not be any type of sexual implications, period.
I agree.
It's just not the place for it.
That's
Even
right.
if you're talking about a heterosexual relationship, it's not the place to introduce children to sexuality.
Yeah.
And so when you're pushing that beyond and you're saying, no, we've got to have homosexuality represented across the board in everything, we don't even try to portray typical normative sexuality.
No. If I turn on Sesame Street,
why homosexuality?
if there was a man kissing a woman on Sesame Street, I'd be irritated. I don't want my 1.5-year-old to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's not the
exactly.
place for it. I don't need, they're watching Cookie Monster. They're not
That's
trying to
right.
learn about that kind of stuff. They don't understand it. It's not for them in the first place. Any kind of discussion about it is not for them at that point in their life.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about why they're doing that? Anyway.
Yeah, I know there's nothing new under the sun,
Yeah.
But I do think we live in a culture now where if everything is accepting, it has to be acceptable. And it can be confusing. And so we want to take a look at this in a loving but truthful way and say,
That's
like,
right.
how did God design this? Even though it gets really confusing, whether it's doctrine or relationships out in the world, it's like, what was the original design of all this? And then it takes us back to Genesis 1. And, but yeah.
Well, what you said is really good. And I even wanted to start the episode like that, but kind of forgot. If you're watching this and you struggle with homosexuality or you're a member of the LGBTQ community, we're not out to get you. Like, we don't have any ill will against anybody. Like in a sense, I guess I am out to get you, but in a good way. Like, I feel like God has a really good
We're not trying to destroy.
No, we're not trying to destroy. We're trying to do what Jesus said his mission was in Luke 19:10, to seek and save the lost. And newsflash, everybody's lost, right? Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So we're trying to reach out to people who are in that community and say, we love you. We care about you. Like, break the fourth
Everybody
wall.
needs salvation. And most often that varies from person to person as to why.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, we're not. So what you're saying, we're not out to destroy you. It's just that this is among other things that the Bible teaches us about that are immoral and we need to repent of them. And right. We need to understand them and control our temptations and adjust ourselves to be as Christ was, to live as him.
That's right.
Right. That's all we're
Well, and as Christians, Jesus said we're supposed to love all people, even our enemies, right? And I'm not saying you're my enemy. I'm saying we're supposed to love all people, right? Yeah. Even the person who's like trying to burn down my house, right? Like, please stop, but I love you. Or no one's trying to burn down my house. This is a bad analogy, maybe. Right. You're thinking, man, this guy's trying to burn. What I'm saying,
the point stands.
The point is that we're supposed to love all people, right? And so that includes people who maybe think their lifestyle is perfectly fine, but we don't think that it is because we think that God created the universe. He sets up the standards of morality. And there's one thing in that article that Jeff Miller wrote, part 3, he was talking about, look, it's not only the things that it will, he gives, I think, 7 statistics from maybe the CDC, 7 reasons statistically that to me show that that lifestyle cause a lot of problems, right? And I don't mean cause problems for me, right? The people who are living in it He lists these 7 things. There may have been more. I wrote down these. He said that the rate of domestic violence is higher in the not just homosexuality, but the LGBT, Q. So like there's more issues of domestic violence, right? There's more disease, like a lot of diseases. The disease rate's way higher, right? They have way shorter lifespans. There's higher risks of cancers, like not like 5%, like 25% in certain cancers. Anxiety, they have much higher rates of anxiety and like mental health. Mental health issues are way higher, right? Mm-hmm. And suicide, the suicide rate is like 5 times. In one group was 5 times higher. I'm not saying that to say like that there's a lot of issues with the lifestyle, other than saying, like, if you're watching this and that's a lifestyle you live, I don't want you to have to go through that. I don't want you to have a higher risk for suicide and disease and cancer.
Yeah, we're not talking about it because it's a personal preference.
No.
If God didn't have a problem with it and it didn't cause problems, we wouldn't be talking about it.
That's right.
Right? I have personal preferences for the way I like my food cooked. If you don't eat it that way, you don't like your steak medium, you like it well, I don't care.
Yeah.
God doesn't have anything to say about it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cause problems.
Yeah.
So it's not like we just don't like it and we want you to not like it and everybody else to not like you.
No.
God has a problem with it. He explains some of the problems with it, some of the consequences of it. Mm-hmm. And then we can look at it ourselves. Like you're saying, we can look at it ourselves. Even if you just not even thinking about the Bible at all, you can see the issues that have come out of it measurably, statistically. And you know what? That's why we're trying to reach out, because we want you to have a better life. Right?
Yeah. And is that not
and why ultimately the best life in the end?
Yeah, the best life in the end. Absolutely. But it's interesting. It's like, we don't want you to endure all these bad things, but God hates it. It's like, have we ever thought maybe there's a certain things that God hates is a reason? The reason he hates when I sin. Why? Because he knows what it does to me. He knows it. He hates the last episode. He hates when we watch pornography. Why? Because he knows it warps your mind and it leads you to being a worse father, a worse friend, a worse husband, right? So it's like God created us. He knows what's good for us and what's bad for us. That's why he gives us things in the Bible. It's not like God says like, this is a completely arbitrary moral decision, but I don't want you to do that. No, there's a reason behind the decisions, the morality that he has as part of his nature. And he says, don't do this. It's harmful.
You can be a parent and you can watch your child grow up and start to make choices that are harmful to them, and they'll be harmful to those who are around them. And you have to make decisions to protect yourself or the rest of your family, the extended family, close family, whatever, that naturally exclude that person. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean that they weren't your child, but it's just there comes a point where your behavior becomes destructive to the harmony, to the peace, to the goodness of that household.
Yeah.
And as fathers in particular, we're faced with that practical, real decision. It's very similar to that. God doesn't want to punish you.
Yeah.
It's just that the behavior, what you're bringing into that can't be allowed there.
Yeah.
And so, he has these things set up to protect his family and to protect himself. And ultimately he wants that for you, but we all have to make our own choice.
Yeah, exactly right.
And we actually had a phone call from a guy who watches the podcast, and he was struggling with leaving the homosexual lifestyle. And he had been burned a whole lot by not even just people in the world, but people who are Christians, because they isolated him from saying well, your sin is just as worse as mine. So if I have a problem with cussing or something, then your homosexual sin is worse. So get out of here. And so he was actually trying to seek love and help and truth, but people would isolate him that were Christians. And so we're sorry.
Is that the name? Don't say it out loud. Just
I think maybe.
Okay.
We had a phone call. I remember the discussion.
Is that the name? And so we're
I think
we're sorry that people do.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's so anyways, we're sorry that sometimes that you be treated people in that lifestyle. We're sorry that people treat you that way. We're sorry that you've been hurt that way before. And we want to just show it goes back to that design. It goes back to that original design of this is how God made it. And if we love God, sometimes we have to make those hard decisions. And there's plenty of other sins that people get caught up in and it's hard to get out of it. I mean, so it's not just, you're not just like some alien. We're all people who sin with
I think
different
ultimately
things.
what you're saying is if you and I give up on the temptations and the sins we've struggled with, we'll go to hell, right? That's a punishment. And we're not saying that what we've done or whatever is necessarily going to let us just skate by and we don't have accountability for it. And you do, because yours is so much worse. The Bible does have some language to talk about differences and sins. But the point is, look, the church, it's a place for you to find help. And sometimes people will abuse that. Sometimes the church has people in it that will let you down.
Every church you ever go to will have people in it that will let you down.
Absolutely.
Like, if there was a perfect church and you went there, you'd ruin it. So look, like, I think I know the guy that you're talking about, because I've talked to him quite a few times, I think afterwards, if we're thinking the same guy.
Oh, sweet.
We've had lots of guys reach out to us that struggle with this lifestyle. And what you hit the nail on the head. What you said is right too. A lot of people have never interacted with somebody that struggles with that. And so what happens when normally people interact with somebody that they're like, they don't know what to do? Panic. And when you panic, you normally are more understanding or less? Normally less. Yeah. So less. I get that. I completely believe and agree that he's probably went places and tried to say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. And they're immediately like, whoa, get this guy out of here, which is completely the wrong attitude.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Authentic Christian Podcast. This podcast has been sponsored by GBN, Gospel Broadcasting Network. You can download the app and start streaming every show, watch every episode, and discover the answers to life's biggest questions today.
While we're on that, if you're watching and you're not the homosexual who's struggling with this, because chances are most of you who are watching are Christians, and you're learning about this and you're thinking about this is part of your routine or something just to help you stay on some Bible topics. You can still benefit from that discussion, because you can be aware of the fact that, hey, you don't exactly know how to handle it if somebody comes up to you and tells you about this issue that they're struggling with. So start learning, figure it out so that when it happens, if it does happen, you're prepared to actually give help to that individual rather than just act or come across as you're repulsed or something like that. I
completely agree. I'll tell you one thing that's really opened my eyes. So let me figure out the right way to say this. Let's say somebody comes in, let's say that I talked to somebody 10 years ago, right, who told me that they were struggling with homosexuality, right? Let's say it's a guy. I may have been tempted to think that guy was just a complete, like, deviant, like that he enjoyed it and he always wanted to have that lifestyle. I'm going to be honest with you. The more people that are struggling with that lifestyle that I've talked to, and the more research I read, do you know what is one of the leading factors to influence that on, like, let's say, I know this not only from reading studies, like scientific studies, but also from talking to people who have come out of this lifestyle, who have said that I'll ask them, what do you think? Do you think anything caused this? Right? Like, do you think what's your take on it? Right? And I remember multiple of them saying the same thing the data says, is that a lot of them were molested as kids. And when that sort of thing happens to a kid, it warps their mind, right? Like they have an adult who they should be able to trust, who's forcing something on them. And I legit now, I don't say feel sorry for them as in a way that like pity them in a mean way, but like it makes me look at it differently, because like, yes, when you become an adult, you still have to rein in certain desires that are not acceptable to God. But whenever I know that person is struggling with something because an adult betrayed them when they were at a young age.
Well, it's just understanding breeds sympathy and compassion.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's easier for you to sympathize and have compassion on somebody when you have an idea of why this happened, why this is this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you guys know about people that do stuff to kids. I mean, it's just like, I think one of the most evil things you could ever do.
Yeah. We talked about that in our last episode we were recording.
Yeah. So when you have like a young innocent child that an adult betrays them and does something like this to that kid, and then that influences in like that decisions that kid is then maybe later. I mean, there's lots of science behind it. Go read that Jeff Miller article. I'll just repetition. It's in the link tree.
Affleck.
Yeah, but lots of other things like that. It's just, it does make you feel for people, like whenever I have a phone conversation now, I mean, 10 years ago, I wasn't having that many phone conversations like this. But now it's just like, man, I'm sorry somebody did that to you. Like, that's awful. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
I know.
God will take care of it in the end. You can believe that.
Oh yeah. And
I'm talking about the person, if they like molested, God will take care of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pure evil. And we know that not everybody has gone through that, like molestation or been abused. But I mean, I remember working at the grocery store, like going into college, and me and the deli lady were taking it out, and somehow it got brought up, and she was a lesbian, and she was just saying, I was raped by a man, and she's afraid of men. And so it stinks that this world is, I mean, it's sin, but it's like, there's some evil people out there, and it causes people to get, it just makes everything confusing, whether it's doctrine or whatever. Like you got Hollywood mentioned on this bullet point, and it's like, when you see something in the media, or you see, we don't know what people go through in life. We don't know what why that person has chosen anything, whether it is homosexuality or any other thing in their life. But we have to meet them and be loving to them and say, let's go back to how God designed everything. And I think I've repeated this 3 times now, but it's like, when we meet people, we love them, but we say, this is the truth. This is how God made it. It is a living for Jesus, and living in the way that God designed things will always be better, because he's the creator of the universe.
Yeah.
And so we talked about this. We want to be as kind as possible to know that it's a sin. The Bible talks about it. It is an abomination. But the church is a place for help, but it's a place for hospital for sinners. And so, we're here for you. If you want to reach out, if you like, go check out the link tree. That's something we're going to do in this season 2, is to be able to provide way more resources than we could possibly talk about in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And this is a very sensitive topic. We all have tried our best to do it justice. But
you said something and it hit on the key word. You said that go back to the way God designed it, or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we talk about this, I mean, it's in the context of sexuality, which design is designed for the marriage relationship. And that's where God went. He said, you go back. Well, where'd God go when he talked about marriage relationships? He went back to the beginning, which is the one who designed it.
When people asked Jesus, he said from the beginning.
Right. Back in Genesis 1. So if you want to talk about, okay, we know what homosexuality is. We know that it's a sin, and it's like many other sins that will condemn your soul. And we know that some people will treat you unfairly, and that people should learn to treat those people more fairly when they come looking for help. Well, why is it a sin? Because it goes against God's design.
Yeah. It's the same thing. It's the same reason me as a heterosexual attracted to women. It's the same thing. It's a sin for me to have any sort of sexual relationship with anyone outside of my wife.
Yeah. You have temptations, and you have natural inbuilt desires, but just because you have the function and the ability, or even that feeling that we have about this subject, it doesn't mean you can just use it any way you want to.
No, of course
God regulated it. He created it for a certain special place, which is the marriage relationship. And he created it with certain circumstances and variables that had to be met, which is one man, one woman
for life.
And they're supposed to be together for life. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
God hates divorce. He only gave ever one exception for that, which we talk about in another episode, or we can.
Sure.
But that's why homosexuality is an issue, because it goes against that design that he created for us. We talked about, he wants to have rules, that analogy I gave earlier, right? You see those in Genesis 1 and other places.
Yeah. I mean, and you think about it too, like one of the issues America's culture's had in the last 60 years now, it's weird to say, but since the 60s and even before that, is this idea of sexual freedom, right? I'm an American. I'm the land of the free. I should do whatever I want to do. And that includes sexually. Not if you're a Christian. I mean, this is not something that's new. People since the beginning of time have wanted freedom from any sort of moral requirement. I mean, it's not just the homosexual community, right? Heterosexual. What was the whole 60s and 70s? Free love, right? Right. I should be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want. All of it goes back to, like you're saying, throwing off the reins of what God wants us to do.
Yeah, the God-given design.
Yeah, that he made in Genesis 2 with man and woman.
Literally.
That's true. I said one earlier.
Well,
whatever.
I don't think there was original chapters in Hebrew either, so don't worry.
I'd say literally a famous actor just came out, and him and his wife. I'm not gonna say the name is, but they just said that. I don't want to say his name.
Open relationship.
He said, I don't want our marriage to be a prison. So him, and this guy's very well known. You can Google it.
Yeah.
Type in those words. But anyways, he said, I don't want our marriage to be a prison. So they equally go sleep with other people, but they'll always be together. And I wanted to recommend Wayne.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Wayne Jones. He's an awesome Christian man. He has a podcast. There's an episode about, it's for Christian men, but girls, y'all can listen to it too. But it's called Real Men Understand the Power of Lust. And it's going back to the design that, the desires we have for sexuality is built for that. So there's a place where we're supposed to enjoy that in marriage. And so I don't know. I think it's a great podcast that breaks it down. But
cool. It'll be in the link tree.
Cool.
Awesome. Recommend it. I know Wayne. He's a great guy. So, all right. We got a couple minutes left. I'm going to spend another minute or two talking about this article from Apologetic Express. So it's part 3. Part 1 talks about the timeline in America, the progression, right? Part 2 talks about the idea of, is there a gay gene, right?
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah. Because a lot of people say, well, it's not a choice. Oh, you think I'm choosing this lifestyle. It's like, well, I do think, that's what the accusation is, right? So Anton LaVey, I forget his first name, right? Anton LaVey was the state church Satan, isn't he? Anton LaVey?
That sounds right. I don't know.
Anyway, there's a guy, there was this search for the gay gene, right? And it's been 30 years now. And anyway, in his search for the gay gene, this is what his quote at the end of the research. It's important to stress what I didn't find. I did not prove homosexuality is genetic or find a genetic cause for being gay. I didn't show that gay men are born that way, the most common mistake people make in interpreting my work, nor did I locate a gay center in the brain. So what he did find is he found like there was some different activity in these brains, but then they found out when they looked at the research that he only did it on men that I think maybe had HIV. So they were like, okay, there's something in my degrees in biology, something in science is like causation does not always mean correlation, which means correlation does not mean causation.
That's right.
Which means just because you see a correlation in these 15 to 30 men's brains doesn't mean it was caused by this. Could have been something else, right? So anyway, and then in part 3 of the episode, it talks about all these reasons we talked about statistically why the lifestyle is not something I'd want. I mean, if I found out that heterosexual people who never got married, if I found out that that's the sort of statistics that went with that, I'd be saying the exact same thing, right? Look, this is not good for you, right? And so I'd recognize that article. It talks about what the data actually shows is it's environmental causes, like bad fathers. There was one guy who did research that his quote was something like, in every single person he ever interviewed, homosexual men, he said not one single one of them ever had a positive relationship with their father. And from the guys that I know that struggle with it, they've told me the exact same thing. So it shows how important a father is in a family. Mm-hmm. And then even more than that was the abuse. A lot of these people said that abuse was what. So, anyway.
Wow.
We don't have enough time to even touch the hem of the garment in one episode of the podcast. But we're going to try to give you a lot of good resources in the link tree, and hopefully you'll check those out. And of course, if we come across more stuff as we read that we think's worthwhile, we'll put it in the link tree. You guys have anything else you want to say?
No. Thanks for listening. Love you guys.
Yeah, we love you. And if you're struggling with this, we love you too. If you're in the LGBTQ community, we care about you. Believe it or not, right? We're not as all Hollywood wants to make it out. They want to show you that I'm a Bible thumping that hates you. No, we love you, right? Mm-hmm. Trust me, it'd be a lot easier to just ignore this topic and not do a podcast on it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Much easier. So we love you. We care about you. We care about your souls. And we hope that you'll reach out and we'll try to connect you with licensed people that can help you. So thanks for watching the Authentic Christian Podcast. We'll see you next episode. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Authentic Christian Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Gospel Broadcasting Network, or GBN for short. You can hop on the App Store, search Gospel Broadcasting Network, and you can download the app. And there's this show, many other great shows that you can watch or listen to and start learning more about the Bible and why we're here, what our purpose is. Thanks for listening.